On the warm, balmy afternoon of August 13th, 1889, a road worker named Denny Coffey was alerted by locals to a foul smell emanating from a road near the Rhone River in Lyon, France. Upon investigating the source of the nauseating odor, Denny discovered a large oilskin bag hidden beneath a bush. Inside the sack was the naked, decomposing body of a man. The police found nothing at the scene that would have helped them to identify the deceased. Could forensic science, which was still very much in its infancy in the late 1800s, reveal the victim's identity? In the times when the events of today's episode took place, one thing they didn't have to worry about was cybersecurity. With the aid of today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, that's a concern you can also be blissfully relieved of. With cybercrime reportedly set to skyrocket in the coming years, it's important to take steps to keep yourself protected while online. A VPN is a virtual private network, and these allow you to encrypt the data you send via the internet. This helps to secure your sensitive information from not just hackers, but also big businesses looking to track your online activities. When we're out and about filming on location, we often have to log into public Wi-Fi, which can be a goldmine for cyber criminals. So being able to install Surfshark on our mobile devices and laptops is a lifesaver. Another great reason for using Surfshark VPN is to get access to content and services that may not be available where you live. This can allow you to unlock extra content across many popular streaming services and even allow you to purchase items and services at prices locked to certain regions across the world. You can sign up to Surfshark now by following the link in the description, and if you use code WELLINEVER, you'll get an extra 4 months for free. Surfshark also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk if you decide it's not for you. So, simply follow the link in the description below to get the deal. The forensic surgeon, Paul Bernard, who carried out the post-mortem examination, concluded that the victim, who was between 35 and 45 years old, had been killed by strangulation 3 to 5 weeks earlier. The man had been tied with 7 meters of rope, and his head had been wrapped in black oilcloth before being placed in a trunk that was used to transport the body. The decay-reeking trunk was found 2 days after the discovery of the body in Saint-Genis-Laval, with a shipping label from Paris suggesting the victim may have traveled over 300 miles to where his body was ultimately dumped. Could it be that this man was a Parisian court bailiff who had been reported missing 2 weeks before? Toussaint-Augustin Gouffé, a prosperous civil servant and widower from Montmartre, Paris, had vanished without a trace around the end of July. On July the 27th, the bailiff's concerned brother-in-law contacted the police, but nothing much was initially done. The Paris Exposition Universelle, a World's Fair, was in full swing at the time, and it wasn't unusual for someone to get swept up in its grandeur and become sidetracked. Toussaint-Augustin also had a reputation for being a womanizer. Perhaps he had forgotten time during his shenanigans. But as days passed without any signs of the bailiff, the authorities had to admit something was wrong. And then the body turned up near Lyon with a connection to Paris. After hearing the news, the chief of the Paris Sûreté, Marie-François Goron, telegraphed a description of Toussaint-Augustin Gouffé to Paul Bernard. The doctor, however, found very few similarities between the cadaver and the missing man. Both reportedly had large and strong teeth and a missing upper right molar, but the corpse was an inch shorter than the bailiff and had black hair, while Toussaint-Augustin had chestnut brown. At 49, the bailiff also didn't match the estimated age of the victim. But to be sure, Gouffe's brother-in-law was sent to Lyon to take a look at the body. The poor man couldn't recognize the badly decomposed corpse as the husband of his late sister, so the authorities had no other choice than to bury the unidentified murder victim in an anonymous pauper's grave and hope more clues would emerge. Weeks passed without progress in the search, but then, in the autumn, Chief Goron received a tip that reignited the investigation. According to an anonymous source, the bailiff had been seen shortly before he vanished at the Brasserie Gutenberg with a man named Michel Eyraud and his mistress Gabrielle Bompard. 46-year-old Michel was a known con man who made a living from fraud and other shady deals, while 21-year-old Gabrielle had worked as a sex worker before Michel took her under his wing. The pair had been living in an apartment at number 3, Rue Tronçon du Coudray in Paris before leaving for America, a day after Toussaint-Augustin Gouffé disappeared. Furthermore, when the shipping label on the trunk was compared to the records of the Gare de Lyon railway station in Paris, the investigators learned it had been shipped to Lyon on July the 27th. The same day, the murder victim was reported missing. As more and more links between the unidentified victim and the bailiff were uncovered, Chief Goron called for the body to be exhumed. The authorities in Lyon felt that digging up and re-examining the remains would be a waste of time. This man had been dead for almost 4 months. Surely it was impossible to make an identification after such a long time. Chief Goron eventually got his way, however. The body was exhumed and a second autopsy began on November the 13th, 1889. This time performed by Professor Alexandre Lacassagne. Professor Lacassagne was head of the Department of Legal Medicine at the University of Lyon and an extremely skilled forensic doctor who had developed many new techniques to help the police to solve difficult cases. If anyone could find evidence tying the corpse to Gouffé, it was Lacassagne. His task wasn't easy in any way. Advanced decay was a big problem in its own, but the heavy-handedness of the first autopsy had also taken a toll on the remains. Dr. Bernard had literally smashed the victim's head open with a hammer to gain access to the man's brain and destroyed the sternum with a chisel. It was now impossible to tell whether the victim had suffered any injuries in these areas. Fortunately, the man's pelvis, the last few vertebrae on the coccyx, and his teeth were still intact. By examining these structures, the fusion of the bones and the shape of the tooth sockets, Lacassagne was able to determine the victim's age, 45 to 50, not 35 to 45 like the first autopsy had concluded. Next, he used a more accurate method of determining a victim's height. Instead of stretching out the body and adding 1.5 inches, as was the custom at the time, Lacassagne measured the size of certain individual bones, including the femur, tibia, and fibula in the legs, and humerus, radial, and ulna in the arms. Based on these numbers, the professor estimated the victim had been 5 feet 8 inches tall, just like Gouffé. The difference in the hair color was easily explained. The cadaver's hair appeared black because of a coating caused by the advanced decomposition. When strands of the victim's hair were washed, it revealed their real colors, chestnut brown. These strands were then compared under a microscope to hair samples from Toussaint-Augustin's hairbrush, a match. But Professor Lacassagne did not stop there. He proceeded to examine the victim's bones and discovered an old injury, something that had happened long before this person died. As he looked at the man's right heel and ankle bones, he noticed discoloration. Upon examining the inner surfaces of the joint, the professor saw that the bones were grainy, coarse, and dented, suggesting that the victim had suffered an ankle injury that hadn't healed properly. When Chief Gouffé interviewed Gouffe's family members, the bailiff's father recalled that his son had broken his ankle as a toddler. Satisfied with his findings, Professor Lacassagna wrote in his report that the body found in Millery indeed is the corpse of Monsieur Gouffé. Following the identification of the body, the investigators worked to uncover to whom the trunk found in Saint-Genis-Laval belonged. A replica of the box was displayed to the public, and soon someone recognized it as the work of a trunk maker in London. The maker revealed that the trunk had been bought only weeks before the murder by a man named Michel Eyraud. A manhunt across North America ensued, with officers following Michel and Gabrielle as they fled through New York, Quebec, Vancouver, and San Francisco. The pair eventually separated, and Gabrielle decided to return to France, where she was promptly arrested on January the 22nd, 1890. 6 months later, Michel was apprehended in Havana, Cuba, after he was recognized by another Frenchman. Finally, the truth about what had happened to Toussaint-Augustin Gouffé was about to be revealed. The police learned that Michel and Gabrielle had been well aware of Toussaint-Augustin's reputation as a womanizer and had used that knowledge to carry out a sinister plan to rob the wealthy bailiff. On July the 26th, Gabrielle headed to the Brasserie Gutenberg, where Gouffé was known to spend most Friday nights. She then started flirting with him, convincing him to follow her to her apartment. Feeling as though his luck was in, the Mark eagerly followed, and once there, didn't resist when Gabrielle proceeded to place the belt of her dressing gown around his neck, thinking it was all part of a sexual game. It was then that Michel, who had been hiding behind the curtains, grabbed the belt, quickly attached it to a rope in a pulley fixed to the ceiling, and pulled hard. The attempt to hang Toussaint-Augustin this way, however, failed, and Michel ended up strangling the bailiff with his bare hands, only to learn it was all for nothing. The victim's pockets were empty. He had left the money he had earned that week in his office. The pair then placed the bailiff's body in the trunk and shipped it to Lyon, where they abandoned it on the road to Millery before leaving the country. The sensational trial of the Gouffe Affair was held on December 1890, during which Gabrielle's defense claimed she had been an involuntary accomplice in the crime. It was claimed that Michel forced the young woman to take part in the murder by using hypnosis. While such a defense maneuver wouldn't do the trick today, it seemed to help Gabrielle Bompard's case. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In turn, Michel Eyraud was given the death penalty, and on February the 3rd, 1891, he met his fate at the sharp end of the guillotine's blade at Place de la Roquette. If it hadn't been for Professor Alexandre Lacassagne's remarkable work, which was described as a masterpiece, the most astonishing that ever had been made in criminology, the Gouffe Affair might never have been resolved. Today, many of the professor's forensic methods are still in use, with many dubbing him the father of scientific criminal investigation. Thank you for watching, and again a big thank you to this episode's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Simply click the link in the description below and use code WELLINEVER to get 4 months free. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.